Howdy y'all, Lance from Permanent Records back with another entry into the AET Archives Diary. This time around I'm featuring the self-titled Mammoth LP from 1981. This is a Southern rock private press masterpiece. It's quite rare. Original copies of this record will run you about $200 to $300 depending on the condition. And it's very rarely seen in the wild. I've never seen a used copy of this in the bins in any record store I've ever gone to or at any of the record fairs that I travel to regularly. I got this copy from one of the band members. That particular band member also hooked me up with this amazing Mammoth Rocks bumper sticker and a zine here, which I'll show here in a bit. But anyway, these four guys self-released this album. The band consisted of Bill Abel on vocals and rhythm guitar, Joey Costa on bass, a gentleman named Buzz Fetters, I'm not making this stuff up, on lead guitar, and boy does he shred, and Ron Herman on drums and other percussion. He is the band member that I got in touch with to procure this album and the bumper sticker that I just showed you a moment ago. Anyway, this is a classic style Southern rock album featured in the AET Archives with a very, very short blurb in the book. I'll read that later, it won't take very long, and I'll try to get through this video here quickly. I don't talk about Southern rock a whole lot. I don't think anybody in the vinyl community talks enough about Southern rock, but we'll get to why that might be in a bit. First and foremost, I'd like to just point out to those of you who are not Southern rock aficionados that there's three distinct different styles of Southern rock, of the classic era of Southern rock. You have the jammy Allman Brothers style, you have the like kind of country and bluegrass influence like Charlie Daniels band style, and then you also have the harder edged kind of working class, tough guy, tough as nails style Southern rock, a la bands like Lynyrd Skynyrd and related projects like Blackfoot. Amazing. Blackfoot is an incredible Southern rock band. A bunch of Native American guys were originally in that band. Really interesting story behind Blackfoot. And the drummer, the original drummer of Lynyrd Skynyrd was in Blackfoot as well. Anyway, that has nothing to do with Mammoth, aside from the fact that these guys were from Florida, just like a bunch of the classic era Southern rock bands. These guys had the harder edged Blackfoot, Lynyrd Skynyrd style. Really ripping dual guitars, really kind of gruff, working class, tough as nails vocals, and a no nonsense attitude. Almost snotty, not quite punk, but there's something about Rocky Erickson and the Aliens track Two-Headed Dog that reminds me a lot of this album. It's not exactly the same thing, but there's similarities to be sure. So let's just say this album is very similar to Blackfoot, Molly Hatchet, and the tougher side of the Skynyrd catalog. You know, think about tracks like I Ain't the One, Give Me Back My Bullets, but it has a softer side, especially on tracks like Thinking About You, Take This Time, and the intro to the song on this album, All Be Gone, I should say. That's their version of Freebird. One cool thing about most private press Southern rock records is that most of them have their own version of Freebird. That track was massive, and you know, Lynyrd Skynyrd was basically the Rolling Stones of the United States at the time. They were very, very successful and still are quite successful to this day. There are Forbes articles, Forbes magazine articles online all over the place, multiple Forbes articles about how successful Lynyrd Skynyrd is to this day. The majority of this album has that tough as nails, rough and ready Southern rock vibe that I think can hold its own against any classic in the genre track for track. It's got a really pro recording quality, and they probably due to the time period that this album it was the time period this album was recorded, 1981, they utilized a fair amount of synthesizer to interesting effect, and it's really charming the way they use it. They almost use it like a space laser gun or something here and there. Anyway, if you strip that away, it's still an amazing album. The songs are very well written. Again, it's a really, really listenable album. In a just world, this particular album could have been a part of the Southern Rock pantheon. Unfortunately, it's just not how it works, and that's why books like the AET Archives exist, right? Well, anyway, Mammoth rocks harder than most Southern rock bands. They have more in common with AC/DC than the Allman Brothers, but they're distinctively Southern, for sure. As evidenced by the track we're listening to now, this song's called Southern Sounds, and this is the ode to the genre that I think would have made their Sunshine State brethren, like the Outlaws, 38 Special, Blackfoot, Leonard Skinner, and Molly Hatchet proud. As is customary with these AET Archives entries, I will now take the time to read the AET Archives entry in the book. This entry is unbelievably short. It's on page 205, and it's just that long. So this will be a quick one. Mammoth, Florida, 1981, says the catalog number, etc. Dillon, Florida label, Southern rock with boogie moves and strong guitar leads, frequently compared to Leonard Skinner. That's it. That's all it says about this album. I think it's really tragic that that is all the attention that this album gets in the AET Archives. It's a really classic Southern rock album, very well done for private pressing, and unfortunately kind of neglected by the editors. These guys got it right most of the time, but I think they did make mistakes and overlook some incredible records in this book. Okay, that said, we will give AET Archives contributor and legendary record collector and musicologist Rich Haupt a lot of credit for including this album in his chapter in the back of the book. So in the back of AET Archives, there are special features. I assume most of you who have this book know about this already. But for those of you who don't, I will attempt to stare at the camera and turn through the pages very, very awkwardly. And you have, as you can see, after the alphabet ends here, we have an article about Exotica, Private Press Exotica by Stefan Curie and Will Louvre. We have an article about Underground Soul and Funk Records by my pal Dante Carfagna of the aforementioned Dogpatch podcast. Also, Stefan Curie has an album or a label called Subliminal Sounds, and Will has a label called Companion Records. You have an article on Tax Scam Rock by Aaron Molinsky, where he, of course, mentions the legendary Stonewall album. And a feature on lounge albums by Patrick Lundberg and with help from Stefan Curie. You had this Southern Rock feature here in the back, a custom label rock article by Patrick Lundberg, the editor of the AET Archives, and a private issue New Age article by Douglas McGowan. Well, in Rich's Southern Rock article, he mentions Mammoth and obviously Crossroads and Legend, etc. And at the bottom here, at the end of the article, he has a list of down and dirty dozen favorite obscure Southern rock albums, and it's in alphabetical order, and the Mammoth record is included there. Because the genre has been neglected for so long, I have started working diligently on tracking a bunch of the Southern rock records in this book, and in the especially from the Down and Dirty Dozen from Rich Hop's chapter, and I've gotten in touch with almost all of them, and I'm excited to share with you that the majority of them will be reissued in the future. So hang tight for that, but you do not need to hang tight any further for a reissue of the Mammoth album. It is here, out now on Riding Easy Records, as you can see there, in a limited edition on green colored vinyl and black vinyl as well. This you can get from Riding Easy, or you can get it from the guy who made it happen, yours truly, at permanentrecordsla.com. Before I forget to mention this, I A-B'd this pressing to the original, and it sounds just as good, if not better, to my ears. At some point, I'll do a whole episode, a whole show, a whole video, whatever you want to call it, on Southern Rock, the history of Southern Rock, some of the highlights of private press Southern Rock from AET Archives, and some of the highlights of the major label world of the genre. But I don't have time for that here today. But if you're curious to learn more, I highly recommend checking out the episode of I'd Buy That for $1, the podcast I'd Buy That for $1, on Spotify and all the other digital streaming platforms that I guested on, where I talked about the 1973 debut album by the Marshall Tucker Band. That gives you a little back history on the genre, and I also talk very extensively about that particular album, which I think is one of the most unsung albums in the genre, and it's a very inexpensive and very accessible album of classic Southern rock. Before I wrap this up, I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge the fact that Southern rock gets kind of a bad rap. Unfortunately, because of the fact that it's from the southern part of the United States of America, in the past, imagery of the stars and bars has been used in the artwork and promotion of a bunch of the albums and bands in the genre. Unfortunately, the Confederate flag was used for many years as a representation of the South, completely ignorant of the fact that it was obviously the flag of the Confederacy, which was a pro-slavery part of the country. I'm sorry if you already know this information, and I don't mean to sound condescending or anything, but I do worry that that element of Southern rock has gotten in the way of some people's enjoyment of it. I have, luckily, through my deep research of Southern rock in general, found that not only were the guys in Mammoth and all the other private, like kind of independent underground Southern rock bands very progressive and liberal, the people in the bands like Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers were also very progressive and liberal. There were even African American guys in the Allman Brothers band, for Christ's sakes. So I'd like to just take one moment to say, don't judge a book by its cover. You can't assume that people from the South or from rural parts of America have a completely different perspective or opposite viewpoint from people in urban big cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. We as humans, Americans or otherwise, have a lot more in common than we do not. And I think it's important to remember that when we're interacting with each other, because we spend a lot of time arguing about politics and just, highlighting the media, etc., highlights a lot of the differences we have. And I think it's really important that we use music and we use albums like this one to come together and bond over the things that we have in common versus fighting over the things that we disagree on. All right, that's enough from the podium. That's enough from the soapbox. My name is Lance Barisi. I own Permanent Records in Los Angeles, California, but I love Southern rock just as much as the next guy. And I bid you adieu with this cool zine that features the Mammoth album in the back. I'll be back with another video soon, and I will continue to contribute to the AET Archives Diary. Thank you very much for watching, subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and shooting me a comment. I really do appreciate it. Take care, y'all. Wait, one more thing. We talk a lot about music on this channel, but I'd just like to remind you one thing. Go vote! Our forefathers fought for the right for us to have that ability, and you should exercise it. So don't forget to vote. Thanks, y'all.